Hey everyone, Brandon here from TruckSafe. The Federal Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse plays a major role in the driver onboarding and qualification processes. But what exactly is it and how does it function? That's what we're discussing in this video, so stay tuned and do us a favor by hitting those like and subscribe buttons below if you find this type of content helpful. On January 6th, 2020, the FMCSA rolled out its Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse, which it describes as an online database that helps keep roads safer for all drivers by identifying in real time drivers prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions, such as operating a commercial motor vehicle due to a drug and alcohol program violation. In essence, the Clearinghouse is a central repository administered by the FMCSA for drug and alcohol testing violation data on all commercial drivers who are subject to the agency's drug and alcohol testing rules, namely CDL drivers. Motor carriers, law enforcement, and state drivers licensing agencies consult the Clearinghouse to determine whether commercial drivers are qualified to operate commercial motor vehicles. So how exactly does the Clearinghouse work? Well, in practice, it works similarly to state and federal driver licensing databases, except, of course, that the Clearinghouse is focused exclusively on drug and alcohol testing violations. In other words, the Clearinghouse is meant to be checked by motor carriers, law enforcement, and state drivers licensing agencies to determine whether a particular driver has committed a violation of the drug and alcohol testing regulations that renders them disqualified to operate a commercial motor vehicle. And if so, whether they've successfully completed the required return to duty process to get back to work. In that sense, the system is similar to the long-standing motor vehicle report, or MVR process, through which motor carriers must periodically run MVRs on all drivers to ensure they are properly licensed to operate a commercial vehicle. Now, the Clearinghouse functions through regulatory reporting and querying obligations. Information concerning a commercial driver's positive test results, refusals to test, or other violations get reported to the Clearinghouse and associated with the driver's CDL number. That information then appears in any queries run by subsequent employers during the hiring process, by law enforcement during roadside inspections, and by state drivers licensing agencies when issuing or renewing a driver's CDL. The FMCSA's overall motivation for the Clearinghouse was to replace the long-standing manual process that required motor carriers to contact all CDL driver applicants' previous DOT-regulated employers from the 3 years preceding their application date to ask specific questions concerning those applicants' drug and alcohol testing histories. Okay, so that's how the Clearinghouse functions at its basic level, but who exactly uses it? Well, the Clearinghouse has several different users, each with their own respective roles. As a preliminary matter, it's important to know that the Clearinghouse obligations only apply with respect to drivers who are subject to the FMCSA's drug and alcohol testing rules in Part 382 of the Federal Safety Regulations. Generally speaking, this includes drivers who operate commercial motor vehicles that require a commercial driver's license. Importantly, what matters for Clearinghouse purposes is that the driver is expected to operate a CDL-sized vehicle for the prospective carrier, not just the fact that the driver happens to hold a CDL. In other words, if I'm hiring a driver to operate a non-CDL vehicle, but he happens to hold a CDL anyway, then I'm not required to run any Clearinghouse queries since I'm not expecting him to operate a CDL-sized vehicle. The various Clearinghouse users and their respective obligations are as follows. First up, we have CDL drivers who must register with the Clearinghouse to review their own drug and alcohol testing information, provide consent to prospective employers to run full Clearinghouse queries, and select a substance abuse professional if applicable. Next up, we have motor carriers or employers of the CDL drivers who also must register with the Clearinghouse, but to report certain types of drug and alcohol violations, run queries, and ensure that no current or prospective employee has had a violation that prohibits them from performing safety-sensitive functions. They can also appoint third-party administrators to help them comply with these obligations if they choose to do so. These TPAs can also register with the Clearinghouse in order to make reports and run queries on behalf of any employer that has appointed them to do so. Next up, we have the medical review officers, or MROs, who verify regulated drug test results. They must register with the Clearinghouse to report verified positive drug test results and certain test refusals. Substance abuse professionals, or SAPs, must register with the Clearinghouse to report return-to-duty assessments and eligibility status for return-to-duty testing. Law enforcement utilizes the Clearinghouse to obtain real-time information about a CDL driver's qualifications to operate. And lastly, state driver's licensing agencies utilize the Clearinghouse to run queries prior to completing certain licensing transactions for CDL drivers. For those required to register for a Clearinghouse account, the process for doing so involves creating a new account through login.gov, which is a government website that requires two-factor authentication. Once the login.gov account is created, the user can proceed through the Clearinghouse's own registration process, which is a guided one available at clearinghouse.fmcsa.dot.gov. Now, one of the major components of the Clearinghouse are the queries run by prospective and existing employers. Specifically, employers of CDL drivers are required to run queries on existing and prospective drivers in specific circumstances. There are two types of queries, full and limited. Full queries reveal the nature of any prior drug or alcohol testing violations for a particular driver and whether the driver has completed the return to duty process. Employers are obligated to run full queries as part of the onboarding process for prospective CDL drivers, as well as in situations where a limited query on a particular driver reveals that information exists about that driver in the Clearinghouse. Now, drivers and prospective drivers must grant the employer specific consent to run a full query, which must be given by that driver through their own Clearinghouse account. If a full query reveals that a driver has a prior drug or alcohol testing violation, and the driver has not yet completed the return to duty process, that driver will be in prohibited status and cannot be used to perform any safety-sensitive functions. Now, limited queries, on the other hand, reveal only if information about a particular CDL driver exists in the Clearinghouse, not the substance of that information. Employers are obligated to run limited queries on all existing CDL drivers at least once every 12 months. Drivers must provide the employer their written consent to run these limited queries, which can be done outside the Clearinghouse and can take the form of a general consent to all limited queries run throughout the course of that driver's employment. Now, if a limited query reveals that information about a particular driver does exist within the Clearinghouse, the employer must then run a full query on that driver within 24 hours to figure out what that information is. If that query is not run within the required time frame, the driver must be removed from safety-sensitive functions. Employers must purchase query plans through the Clearinghouse in order to run these required queries. As of the date we're publishing this video, queries, both full and limited, cost a flat $1.25 per query. Employers that anticipate performing a high volume of queries each year have the option of purchasing an unlimited query plan for $24,500 per year. Now, once either a full or limited query is run on a particular driver, the system will automatically notify the employer if that driver's Clearinghouse status changes within 12 months after the query was run. So, for example, if I run a query on driver John Doe on May 5th and it shows that he is not prohibited from performing safety-sensitive functions, but then his status subsequently changes to prohibited on October 5th, the system will automatically alert me that his status has changed. Now, once I receive that notification, I must immediately run a full query to reveal the nature of the status change. And, assuming the driver is now in prohibited status, I have to remove him from safety-sensitive functions like driving. The second major component of the Clearinghouse are, of course, the reports of violations that are made to it. The types of reports that must be made to the Clearinghouse depend on the user who's making them. Employers of CDL drivers, or TPAs acting on their behalf, have an obligation to report certain types of violations, whereas MROs have an obligation to report other types of violations. For example, verified positive drug test results get reported to the Clearinghouse by the MROs, whereas positive alcohol test results, certain refusals to test, and actual knowledge of drug or alcohol use all get reported by the employers. So to wrap up here, the FMCSA's Drug and Alcohol Clearinghouse has a lot of moving parts, and motor carriers and CDL drivers should take care to ensure they understand their regulatory obligations and how to use the system so they don't run afoul of the rules. For even more in-depth information on these types of regulatory topics, be sure to check out our innovative online compliance courses for safety managers and for drivers over at trucksafeacademy.com. Also, be sure to check out our detailed compliance articles on our website, trucksafe.com, and follow us on our various social media pages for the latest highway transportation news and analysis. Thanks for watching.